Yo, dog, what should we do today? Seems kind of boring.
I don't know, cool. Maybe hunt. Or maybe we should check out that new taco stand the pterodactyls opened up.
Oh yeah, you should try their all-veggie tacos.
Just
I
to
promise
all
it's
plant
fire.
you.
Hey, doesn't that star look like it's getting bigger?
Why is the water hot?
You are standing in a forest 66 million years ago, and nothing feels wrong yet. The air is warm, insects are humming. Somewhere nearby, something enormous is chewing. It seems like an ordinary day, but sadly, this ordinary day quickly becomes history in the next few minutes. The sky is going to open up, and everything you think you know about extinction is about to be rewritten. This isn't a story about one moment, it's a story about time. The kind of time that starts in seconds, stretches into hours, then months, and finally reveals that the killing blow was never the impact itself. It was everything that came after. Picture a triceratops mid-graze, tearing at a fern, completely unbothered. Picture a young tyrannosaur half asleep in the shade, dreaming of probably nothing. This is the calm before the storm. Every extinction story needs one. And this one is about to end very, very soon. 20 kilometers per second. That's the speed of the object entering Earth's atmosphere over what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. For context, a rifle bullet travels at less than 1 kilometer per second. This thing is moving 20 times faster than that, and it is roughly the size of Mount Everest. There is no warning system. There is no siren. There is only sky. And then there is fire. The asteroid strikes with the force of 10 billion Hiroshima bombs, instantly. The crater it carves, the Chicxulub crater, stretches over 150 kilometers wide. So large, it wasn't even fully identified by geologists until the late 20th century, buried under Mexican limestone the whole time. Most people picture a big explosion. This is not just a big explosion. This is a wound, a scar, etched into the planet. And this is where the story stops being theoretical. In 2019, paleontologist Robert De Palma published findings from a site in North Dakota called Tanis in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. What his team found there is the closest thing science has to a photograph of the first hour of the extinction. Fish, fossilized mid-death, with tiny glass beads lodged in their gills. Those beads are called impact spherules, molten rock flung into the sky by the asteroid strike that cooled into glass as it rained back down across the continent. The fish weren't just near the impact, they were breathing its debris as it fell from space, thousands of kilometers away, within minutes of the strike. Minutes. Not days, not weeks. Minutes. That's the plain English version of what instantaneous global consequence actually means. Death didn't wait for shockwaves to travel by land. It fell from the sky like rain. Back to the forest. The blast wave arrives before the sound does, which means the trees are already snapping before the roar even reaches them. Thermal radiation, essentially. Invisible heat pulsing outward like an oven door thrown open across an entire hemisphere, ignites anything dry enough to burn. Somewhere in that forest, our tyrannosaur wakes up. It has perhaps seconds to register that the world has changed. For animals near the impact site, this part of the story is brutally short. There's a strange mercy in that. But most dinosaurs on Earth are not near the impact site, and for them, the story is only just beginning, and it's going to be far slower and far crueler. Within hours, the debris that didn't fall as glass is falling as fire. Superheated ejecta re-entering the atmosphere ignites wildfires across continents. Ash and soot rise into the sky in volumes that are difficult to comprehend, blotting out sunlight over regions the size of countries. Somewhere far from Mexico, a duck-billed hadrosaur herd watches the horizon turn a color that horizons aren't supposed to turn. They don't know what's coming. They just know the light is wrong. Isn't it strange that the animals who survive the initial blast are in some ways the unluckiest ones? Because surviving the first minute just means you get to dread everything after it. Think about what fallout actually means in plain English. It's not a metaphor here. Rock, glass, and molten debris were thrown so high and so fast during impact that some of it briefly left the atmosphere entirely, only to come screaming back down as thousands of individual meteor-like streaks, all at once, all over the planet. Each one added a small pulse of heat to the sky. Multiply that by the sheer volume of ejected material, and you get something scientists have described as a kind of global broiler effect. Not enough to cook everything outright everywhere, but enough to ignite dry vegetation across huge stretches of the planet within hours. Forests that had nothing to do with Mexico were burning before the day was even over. Smoke joins ash. Ash joins dust thrown up by the impact itself. Together, they climb into the stratosphere, high enough that rain can't easily wash them back out. This is the moment the sky stops being blue. This is where the story shifts from disaster movie to slow siege. Scientists call this period the impact winter, and it is arguably the most important and most misunderstood part of the entire extinction. The impact vaporized sulfur-rich rock at the strike site, launching massive quantities of sulfate aerosols, essentially tiny reflective particles, into the upper atmosphere. Once up there, those particles act like a global sunshade, bouncing sunlight back into space instead of letting it reach the ground. Less sunlight means less heat retained, and less heat retained means the planet starts to cool fast. A 2017 study by climate scientist Charles Bardeen and colleagues modeled exactly how fast and how far. Their findings estimated that global land temperatures dropped by as much as 26 degrees Celsius in the aftermath of the impact. 26 degrees. That's not a chilly season. That's the difference between a warm summer day and a walk-in freezer applied to the entire surface of the Earth for years. Photosynthesis. The process plants rely on to convert sunlight into energy essentially stops working properly when sunlight itself is being filtered out at a planetary scale. And when plants stop producing, everything downstream of plants stops eating. This is the part of the story most people skip. The asteroid gets all the attention because it's dramatic and it's fast and it's cinematic. But the asteroid didn't kill most of the dinosaurs. Starvation did. Follow that hadrosaur herd forward a few weeks. The ferns they used to graze are browning, then blackening, then gone. The insects that pollinated the flowering plants are dying off in the cold and dark. The small mammals scavenging in the undergrowth are having an easier time of it. Smaller bodies need less food, and some of them can burrow, wait, and outlast conditions that no multi-ton herbivore ever could. There's a dark irony sitting right there in the food chain. Being enormous, which had been the ultimate advantage for 160 million years, becomes a liability overnight. You cannot hide a 40-foot body from a famine. Months pass. The skies stay dim. Ocean chemistry shifts as debris and acid rain alter surface waters, collapsing plankton populations, which collapses the small fish that eat plankton, which collapses the larger animals that eat those fish. It's the same story playing out on land and at sea simultaneously, a chain reaction with no link strong enough to hold the rest together. Consider what that means for something like a long-necked sauropod, an animal that might once have eaten hundreds of kilograms of vegetation a day just to keep its own body running. There is no version of a famine that animal survives for long. Its size, once armor against predators, is now simply more mouth than the ecosystem can feed. Meanwhile, smaller carnivores that once competed with giants for scraps suddenly find themselves with less competition, at least for a while, before they too run out of anything left to hunt. Is it survival of the fittest or survival of the smallest appetite? The fossil record increasingly suggests it was the latter. And in parts of the world, particularly in what is now India, there's an added complication. The Deccan Traps, a massive volcanic region, had already been erupting for tens of thousands of years before the asteroid ever arrived, pumping additional greenhouse gases and toxic compounds into the atmosphere. Some researchers argue this volcanism alone was destabilizing global ecosystems before impact. Whether the Deccan traps made the asteroid's aftermath better or worse is still debated. But one thing isn't. This was not a single catastrophe. It was one catastrophe landing directly on top of another. By the time the dust and aerosols finally settle, a process that likely took years, roughly 75% of all species on Earth are gone. Every non-avian dinosaur, ancient marine reptiles, entire branches of the tree of life snapped off in what amounts to a geological instant. But here's the counterintuitive twist, the one that rarely makes it into the highlight reel. The dinosaurs didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because the crisis didn't happen once. It happened in stages: blast, fire, winter, famine. And surviving stage 1 bought you nothing for stage 2. Some of the toughest animals on the planet made it through the impact itself, only to starve in the dark months later, undone not by force, but by attrition. Meanwhile, the small, unglamorous survivors, early mammals, some birds, creatures that could burrow, scavenge, and get by on very little, made it through precisely because they weren't built for dominance. They were built for endurance. There's something uncomfortably familiar about that, isn't there? Because that's not just a prehistoric story. That's the shape of almost every real crisis. The initial shock is rarely what determines the outcome. What determines the outcome is what happens in the weeks and months after the headlines fade. When the adrenaline is gone, the cameras have moved on, and what's left is the slow, unglamorous work of enduring conditions that never fully return to normal. Surviving the first moment of a crisis and surviving its aftermath are two entirely different skills. History keeps proving that the second one is harder. The tyrannosaur that woke to a firestorm never had a choice in any of this. But its extinction wasn't really written in that first violent minute. It was written in the months of gray sky and empty branches that followed, the slow arithmetic of less food, less warmth, less time. So picture that forest again. Warm air, humming insects, something enormous, chewing, unaware. It seemed like an ordinary day. And the real killer was never the asteroid at all. It was everything that came after, the part of the story that's still, quietly, writing itself in every crisis since. Subscribe and like so I can buy more catnip and treats. Also, watch some more of my videos. Catch you later.